Humans are not ready, Professor Zaltrix Vale declared, his barbed voice cutting through the hum of the Galactic Collective's council chamber. They lack the mental architecture for advanced galactic thought. Allowing them into our academic circles would be an insult to the brilliance cultivated here for millennia. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Representatives from dozens of species, each adorned with the markers of their unique biology, turned their attention to the small delegation of humans seated at the far end of the chamber. Despite the whispers and the judgmental gazes, Dr. Clara Voss sat ramrod straight, her jaw clenched tightly, as if her sheer will alone could deflect the derision. The chamber, a vast dome made of pulsating crystalline material, magnified every sound. Clara could hear her heartbeat thrumming in her ears, but she refused to falter. Humanity had fought hard to join the collective, and this moment, this very meeting, was supposed to cement their place among the stars. Instead, it felt like a trial by fire. Counselor Lexta, an amphibious being with shimmering, translucent skin, tried to diffuse the tension. Professor Vale, while I respect your expertise, humanity has demonstrated remarkable adaptability in the short time they've been part of our interstellar community. Surely, they deserve the chance to prove themselves. Zaltrix's elongated features curled into what Clara assumed was the alien equivalent of a sneer. Adaptability is not the same as brilliance, counselor. Let us not confuse cleverness with competence. Clara had heard enough. She rose from her seat, drawing surprised glances from her fellow humans and dismissive smirks from the aliens. Permission to speak, she asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. The council chamber quieted. Zaltrix tilted his head, his many eyes narrowing. Granted, though I doubt anything you say will change the inevitable. Thank you, Clara said, stepping forward. Her boots echoed against the crystalline floor. She locked eyes with Zaltrix, or at least one of his eyes, and spoke with measured precision. You claim humanity is incapable of contributing to your academic circles. Fine. Then give us a chance to prove you wrong. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Zaltrix let out a low, rumbling laugh. And how do you propose to do that, little human? Clara didn't blink. Challenge us. Present a problem, any problem, that your greatest minds have failed to solve. If we solve it, you will admit humanity deserves a place here. Zaltrix leaned back, his towering form radiating smug amusement. A bold claim. Very well. He waved a clawed hand, and a holographic projection sprang to life in the center of the chamber. Symbols and equations shimmered in the air, forming a dizzying lattice of incomprehensible complexity. This, he said, his voice dripping with disdain, is the Orion paradox. It has baffled the collective's brightest minds for over 10 millennia. If you, or any human, can solve it, I will personally champion your cause. Clara's gaze locked onto the hologram, her pulse quickening. She didn't understand it yet, but she didn't have to. This was her chance, humanity's chance, to prove their worth. I accept, she said without hesitation. The chamber erupted in chaos. Zaltrix's laughter rang out above the noise. Then let history record this moment, the day a human dared to face the impossible. Clara returned to her seat, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The weight of the galaxy's oldest problem now rested on her shoulders, and she was determined not to let humanity down. The Orion paradox was not a single equation but a labyrinth. A twisting, multidimensional enigma that had swallowed the efforts of civilizations far older and more advanced than humanity. And yet, Dr. Clara Voss couldn't tear her eyes away from it. The holographic lattice shimmered before her, each symbol glowing faintly as if daring her to understand. Clara sat alone in the quiet study room assigned to humanity's delegation within the Galactic Collective's massive council complex. The walls were a smooth, iridescent material that shifted colors gently, as if reacting to her thoughts. A subtle hum of alien machinery filled the silence. You've been staring at it for hours, a voice said from behind her. Clara turned to see Aaron Threx, her newly assigned liaison. He was a tall, serpentine alien with emerald green scales and 4 slender arms. His tone was neutral, but his yellow eyes held a flicker of curiosity. Like the rest of the collective, he probably thought her effort was futile. I'm not staring, Clara replied, rubbing her temples. I'm trying to reframe it. Reframe? Aaron's head tilted slightly. His species, the Lareth, were renowned for their logical precision, yet Clara often found their interpretation of creativity lacking. "It's how we solve problems on Earth," Clara said, standing and gesturing toward the hologram. "We don't just follow established methods, we question assumptions. Reframe the problem. Think sideways." Aaron's forked tongue flicked out briefly, an expression she was learning to recognize as skepticism. The Orion paradox is not merely a problem, it is an artifact of logic. It exists because the universe itself is inconsistent. 10,000 years of attempts have proven this. "Then maybe it's not just a math problem," Clara said, pacing. "Maybe it's something else. Something the collective hasn't considered." Aaron crossed his lower set of arms while the upper set rested on his narrow hips. "An intriguing idea, but dangerous. If you challenge too much of what we know, you risk being dismissed entirely. Or proving that your assumptions were wrong." Clara stopped and looked directly at him. "That's why I need your help." His pupils narrowed. "My help? To do what?" "To help me understand the framework," she said. "Your species contributed heavily to the current mathematical model the collective uses, right? I need someone who knows it inside out, someone who can translate it for me." Aaron studied her for a long moment before letting out a low, clicking sound. "If I assist you, and you fail, it will reflect poorly on my reputation. And if I succeed, you'll be part of solving the galaxy's oldest mystery," Clara countered. "Isn't that worth the risk?" He seemed to weigh her words carefully before nodding. "Very well. But be warned, human, this is not just a test of intellect. It's a trial of endurance. The Orion paradox has driven many brilliant minds to despair." Clara smiled faintly. "Despair isn't in my vocabulary." The following days passed in a blur of numbers, symbols, and calculations. Aaron proved to be a patient, if cautious, mentor. He guided Clara through alien mathematical constructs that bent her mind in ways she hadn't thought possible. The equations weren't just abstract, they had a physicality to them, a connection to the structure of spacetime itself. As Clara delved deeper, she began to notice something strange. There were patterns within the paradox, echoes of shapes and sequences that felt human. They reminded her of fractals she had studied on Earth, recursive patterns that repeated endlessly. It was as if the Orion paradox wasn't alien at all, or at least, not entirely. But just as the first glimmers of understanding began to form, a new challenge emerged. The collective's Academic Oversight Council summoned her for an evaluation. Aaron warned her that it was likely an attempt to discredit her progress. As Clara prepared for the meeting, she couldn't shake the feeling that the Orion paradox wasn't just a mathematical puzzle. It was something much bigger, and solving it might uncover truths the collective didn't want humanity to know. As Clara leaves her study, she glances back at the hologram. The symbols seem to pulse faintly, almost as if alive. She shakes her head and pushes the thought aside. "Just the pressure," she mutters, unaware of how close she is to unlocking something far greater than anyone imagined. "Your methods are reckless." Professor Zaltrix Vale's voice echoed through the grand academic oversight chamber, his words brimming with disdain. He towered over Clara, his elongated frame casting a shadow that seemed to stretch forever under the chamber's pale blue light. "This is not a puzzle for children to tinker with. The Orion paradox requires precision, not your primitive, brute force experimentation." Clara met his gaze without flinching, though her heart pounded against her ribs. She stood at the center of the circular chamber, surrounded by representatives from dozens of species, each more alien and inscrutable than the last. Their expressions ranged from mild amusement to outright hostility. Only Aaron Threx, seated off to the side, offered a faint glimmer of encouragement, though even his serpentine features betrayed concern. "I'm not here to impress you, Professor," Clara said, her voice steady. "I'm here to solve the problem. And if that means approaching it in ways the collective hasn't considered, so be it." The room buzzed with murmurs. A cephalopod-like counselor raised several appendages, signaling for order. "Dr. Voss," the counselor said in a measured tone, "we acknowledge your progress, but we must question your methods. You've disregarded centuries of established protocols in favor of intuition." Clara inhaled sharply. "With respect, intuition is why humanity has advanced so rapidly. We've built entire technologies on leaps of understanding, on seeing connections others missed. Zaltrix snorted, a sound like grinding metal. And how has that served you? Your species is barely out of its infancy. You presume to lecture us on intellectual rigor? Before Clara could respond, Aaron rose from his seat. His deep, resonant voice cut through the tension. Professor Zaltrix, while Dr. Voss's approach may seem unorthodox, it has yielded preliminary insights. She has identified recursive patterns within the paradox, patterns previously overlooked. Zaltrix's many eyes narrowed. And what of it? Patterns alone are meaningless. They're not meaningless if they lead somewhere, Clara interjected, her confidence bolstered by Aaron's support. The patterns suggest the Orion paradox isn't just a mathematical construct. It's a system, a map, maybe, that reflects deeper truths about spacetime itself. The room fell silent. Even Zaltrix seemed momentarily taken aback. You claim the paradox is intentional? Asked Counselor Lexta, her translucent form shimmering with intrigue. Clara nodded. Yes. I believe it was designed, not as an unsolvable problem, but as a test. Something left behind by whoever first discovered the nature of spacetime. The chamber erupted into debate. Some counselors seemed intrigued, while others dismissed her claim outright. Zaltrix, however, remained deathly still, his expression unreadable. Later, as Clara and Aaron returned to their study chambers, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That went well, she said sarcastically. Aaron glanced at her, his yellow eyes glinting. You've made enemies today. But you've also planted doubt in their minds, and that's no small feat. Clara sank into her chair and stared at the Orion paradox hologram. The recursive patterns she'd identified still shimmered faintly, like a riddle taunting her from the edge of comprehension. Do you think I'm right? She asked Aaron. He hesitated. If the paradox truly is a test, then its purpose is far greater than anyone in the collective has considered. But solving it, that might be more dangerous than you realize. Clara frowned. Dangerous how? Aaron leaned closer, his voice low. There are whispers, rumors of ancient civilizations that dared to unlock secrets about spacetime. Civilizations that vanished without a trace. If you're right, Dr. Voss, solving the Orion paradox might not just change our understanding of the universe, it could change everything. As Aaron speaks, the Orion paradox hologram flickers, then briefly shifts into a new pattern, a sequence neither Clara nor Aaron has seen before. They stare in stunned silence as it pulses once, then fades back to its original form. It's evolving, Clara whispers, her voice filled with awe and fear. The Orion paradox pulsed in the dim light of the study chamber, its symbols rearranging themselves into a configuration that Clara Voss could only describe as alive. She leaned forward, her breath shallow, as her mind struggled to grasp the new pattern. It wasn't just evolving, it was reacting. To her attempts to solve it. Do you see this? She whispered, her voice edged with both awe and trepidation. Aaron Threx stood beside her, his scaled form motionless. His yellow eyes flickered, betraying a rare moment of uncertainty. I see it. And I don't like it. The hologram shimmered again, the symbols shifting once more, forming a sequence that defied known mathematical logic. Clara scribbled furiously on her datapad, trying to capture the fleeting shapes. Every instinct screamed that she was on the verge of something monumental. This isn't just a test, she muttered, more to herself than to Aaron. It's responding to my thought process. It's trying to teach me. Aaron's tail coiled tightly behind him, a physical sign of his unease. If the paradox is aware, as you suggest, then it raises troubling implications. Who, or what, created it? And why? Clara didn't answer. She was already lost in the equations, her mind racing to keep pace with the hologram's changes. The recursive patterns she'd identified earlier had begun to converge into a singular equation, one so alien and complex it made her head throb. She reached out to touch the hologram instinctively, her fingers hovering just shy of the glowing lattice. A sudden surge of heat radiated from the display, forcing her to recoil. It's locked, she murmured, her brow furrowing. There's something blocking me from fully accessing it. Aaron stepped closer, his voice low. Perhaps it's locked for a reason. The Orion paradox has existed for 10,000 years. What if solving it wasn't the goal? What if it was meant to remain unsolved? Clara glanced at him sharply. You're saying it's a trap? I'm saying it's a warning, Aaron replied. The collective has long theorized that the paradox might be tied to forbidden knowledge. Knowledge that could destabilize the fabric of spacetime, or worse. The tension between them was interrupted by the sharp chime of an incoming communication. The hologram shifted, replaced by the stern visage of Jorin Kale, a rogue historian and self-styled archivist who had taken an interest in Clara's work. Dr. Voss, Jorin said without preamble, his gravelly voice urgent. You've stirred the hornet's nest. The Kryath Dominion knows about your progress. They're coming for you. Clara's stomach dropped. The Kryath Dominion, a militaristic faction known for their ruthlessness, had been watching her from the shadows, waiting for an excuse to intervene. Why? Clara asked, her voice tight. Because they believe the Orion paradox isn't just a problem, Jorin said. They believe it's a key. And they don't want you to unlock it. Aaron hissed softly. We need to leave. Now. Clara hesitated, her gaze flicking back to the shifting hologram. She knew they were in danger, but she also knew she couldn't abandon her work. Not when she was so close. Pack your things, Aaron said, his tone brooking no argument. We'll take the data with us. If the Dominion captures you, Earth's entire future could be at stake. As they scrambled together Clara's notes and equipment, the chamber lights dimmed suddenly, plunging them into semi-darkness. A low rumble echoed through the building, followed by the unmistakable hum of approaching ships. They're here, Aaron said grimly, his forearms working quickly to seal Clara's data into a portable device. Clara grabbed her datapad and the hologram projector, her heart pounding. I'm not giving up, she said, her voice resolute. Aaron nodded. Then you'd better stay alive long enough to finish what you've started. As they fled the chamber, Clara glanced back one last time. The Orion paradox's hologram flickered, and for a brief moment, a single symbol hovered in the air, one Clara didn't recognize. It pulsed brightly, then vanished. What was that? Aaron asked as they ran. I don't know, Clara said, clutching the portable device to her chest. But I think it's the answer. The Orion paradox was no longer a puzzle. It was a battlefield. Clara Voss sat in the dim confines of the spacecraft's cargo hold, her mind racing as the events of the past few hours replayed in her head. The Kryath Dominion's ambush had forced her and Aaron Threx to flee the Galactic Collective's academic hub under the cover of chaos. Now, with their ship streaking through the void of deep space, Clara had to grapple with the reality that solving the paradox might make her more than just a mathematician. It might make her a target. You've barely spoken since we left, Aaron said, his voice breaking the silence. He stood by the control console, his serpentine body coiled in a way that betrayed his tension. Tell me you have a plan. Clara glanced up from her datapad, where the evolving Orion paradox glowed faintly. I'm working on it. The key is in the patterns, it has to be. The sequence I saw before we left, it wasn't random. Aaron's eyes narrowed. You're certain? Certain enough to keep going, she replied, her voice firmer than she felt. The paradox is converging towards something. And whatever that something is, it's reacting to my inputs. Or luring you in, Aaron muttered, but he didn't press further. Instead, he activated the ship's cloaking protocols, ensuring they'd remain undetected as they slipped through a remote trade corridor. As the hours passed, Clara delved deeper into the paradox. The recursive patterns she'd identified earlier had begun forming a coherent structure, one that hinted at a profound relationship between mathematics and physical reality. Every new insight came with an overwhelming sense of both exhilaration and dread. Jorin Kale's voice crackled over the ship's comm system, breaking her concentration. Dr. Voss, I hope your escape wasn't too harrowing. Clara sighed, leaning back. Define harrowing. We barely got out alive. You're lucky I intercepted the Dominion's comm chatter, Jorin said, his tone gruff but sincere. They're desperate to stop you. They know what's at stake. And what exactly is at stake? Clara asked, her frustration bubbling over. You keep hinting at things, Jorin. If you know something about this paradox, now's the time to share. There was a pause before Jorin spoke again. The Orion paradox is more than a mathematical challenge. It's a key, yes, but not to some simple prize. It unlocks a technology left behind by an ancient civilization, one that could rewrite the laws of spacetime. Aaron hissed softly. You mean the founders? Clara frowned. The founders? The ones who seeded many of the collective's member worlds with knowledge and infrastructure, Aaron explained. They disappeared eons ago, but their traces remain. The Orion paradox might be one of their relics. Jorin's voice grew grave. If the Dominion gets their hands on the solution, they'll use it to dominate the galaxy. That's why you can't stop now, Clara. You're humanity's best hope, and possibly the galaxy's. With renewed determination, Clara worked tirelessly through the ship's night cycle. As Aaron rested, she pieced together fragments of the paradox, aligning patterns and equations into a unified whole. The shapes she saw reminded her of Earth's fractals, infinitely complex yet deceptively simple at their core. As the final pieces fell into place, Clara realized the paradox was more than a theoretical framework. It was a blueprint. The completed sequence described a method for manipulating spacetime itself, creating stable wormholes that could connect any 2 points in the universe. Her breath caught. This wasn't just a key, it was a weapon, or a miracle. Depending on whose hands it fell into. Aaron. Clara called, her voice trembling. He was by her side in an instant, his yellow eyes scanning the projection. You solved it? I think so, she whispered. It's beautiful. Terrifying, but beautiful. Before Aaron could respond, the ship's alarm blared. Proximity alert, the computer intoned. Unidentified vessels approaching. Clara's heart sank. The Dominion had found them. Aaron rushed to the cockpit, his voice sharp. They're hailing us. Clara gripped the console tightly as the ship's screen flickered to life. A Dominion commander glared at them, his voice cold and commanding. Dr. Voss, surrender the Orion paradox. Refuse, and your ship and your precious Earth will burn. Clara's fingers hovered over the projector, her mind racing. She had the solution, but using it now could unleash consequences she couldn't predict. Clara, Aaron said, his voice low, what do we do? She stared at the hologram, its intricate beauty reflecting in her wide eyes. We play the last move, she said, her voice resolute. And we don't lose. The Dominion commander's face loomed on the ship's display, his eyes cold and predatory. This is your final warning, Dr. Voss. Hand over the Orion paradox, or we'll reduce your ship and your homeworld to ashes. Clara Voss stood frozen, the weight of her discovery pressing down on her like a collapsing star. The Orion paradox wasn't just a key to understanding spacetime, it was the power to control it. She glanced at Aaron Threx, whose tense posture betrayed his readiness for a fight. You can't give it to them, Aaron said in a low voice. If the Dominion gets the solution, they'll tear the galaxy apart. Clara's mind raced. The Dominion's fleet was seconds away, their weapons already locking onto the ship. The Orion paradox shimmered on the portable projector, its solution a series of luminous equations that pulsed with an almost sentient energy. What if I use it? Clara said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Aaron's yellow eyes widened. You don't know what will happen. The Orion paradox could do anything, collapse spacetime, create a singularity. Or save us, Clara interrupted. I didn't solve this to let it die in some Dominion warlord's hands. We have one shot. I'm taking it. The Dominion ships emerged from hyperspace, their sleek, obsidian hulls casting an ominous shadow over Clara's vessel. The commander's voice barked again, this time laced with impatience. Surrender now, or face annihilation. Clara's hands trembled as she activated the Orion paradox. The hologram expanded, filling the cabin with radiant light. Equations unraveled in real time, cascading into a three-dimensional lattice that pulsed with immense energy. The ship's systems began to flicker as the paradox's powers surged through the circuitry. Clara, this is madness. Aaron shouted, his scaled hands gripping the console. You're destabilizing the ship. Clara's voice was calm, almost serene. It's not the ship. It's spacetime adapting to the solution. The lattice projected outward, extending beyond the ship in a burst of shimmering light. Clara felt a deep, resonant hum in her chest as the paradox reached its final form. The Dominion ships, now close enough to fire, suddenly halted mid-motion, their engines flickering erratically. What are you doing?" The Dominion commander's voice cracked over the comm, panic replacing his arrogance. Clara's gaze was fixed on the projection. "I'm showing you what happens when you try to control something you don't understand." The Orion paradox's lattice began to expand exponentially, enveloping the Dominion fleet in a field of spatial distortion. Time itself seemed to slow, the ships caught in a swirling web of fractured reality. For a moment, the universe felt like it was holding its breath. And then, silence. When the light faded, Clara and Aaron stood in stunned awe. The Dominion fleet was gone, not destroyed, but relocated. The projector displayed a single symbol, a coordinate in deep space. "They're alive," Aaron murmured, his voice thick with disbelief. "You didn't destroy them." Clara exhaled slowly, her hands finally steady. The Orion paradox wasn't a weapon. It was a warning and a tool. It gave them a chance to think about what they're doing. Somewhere far away, they'll have time to reconsider their choices. Aaron nodded slowly, his respect for Clara now evident in his gaze. "You've done more than solve the paradox. You've changed everything." The Galactic Collective convened weeks later, their chambers abuzz with rumors of Clara's achievement. As she stood before the assembly, the Orion paradox's projector in hand, she felt the weight of their scrutiny. "Dr. Voss," Counselor Lexta began, her shimmering form leaning forward, "you've proven humanity's intellect and courage. You've earned not only our respect but our partnership." A murmur of agreement rippled through the council. Even Professor Zaltrix Vale, seated at the edge of the assembly, could only glare silently. Clara stepped forward. The Orion paradox wasn't just a challenge, it was a message. Knowledge is a responsibility, not a privilege. Humanity isn't perfect, but we're ready to share that responsibility with the collective. Applause, tentative at first, then thunderous, erupted throughout the chamber. Humanity had not only earned a seat at the table, they had set the standard for what it meant to be a part of the galaxy's future.